Female intern fell asleep on stranger's shoulders on a bus, not knowing he's a CEO millionaire. At the evening commuter bus rumbled gently through the city streets, its blue seats half filled with tired workers making their way home after another long day. The soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic swaying created a peaceful atmosphere, punctuated only by the occasional quiet conversation or the rustle of newspapers. Caroline Mitchell settled into a window seat near the middle of the bus, her white blouse slightly wrinkled from her 12-hour shift at the marketing firm where she worked as an intern. At 26, she was grateful for the opportunity to gain experience in her chosen field. Even though the unpaid position meant taking evening classes and working weekend jobs to cover her expenses, the bus was her lifeline, a reliable way to get from her small apartment to the downtown office district without the expense of a car payment and parking fees. She had learned to use the 40-minute ride as transition time, watching the city pass by while mentally shifting from work mode to evening study sessions. Charles Davidson boarded at the financial district stop, loosening his tie slightly as he found an aisle seat. At 33, he had built his investment firm from a small startup into a major player in the regional market. But success hadn't dulled his appreciation for simple moments of quiet reflection. He preferred taking public transportation when possible, finding that the shared experience of the commute kept him connected to the rhythms of everyday life that his wealth might otherwise insulate him from. There was something grounding about sitting alongside teachers, nurses, clerks, and students, all of them part of the same human tapestry of people working to build better lives. As the bus made its way through the evening traffic, Caroline felt the familiar weight of exhaustion settling over her shoulders. She had been up until 2 a.m. in the morning, finishing a presentation for her internship supervisor, then risen at 6 a.m. to prepare for another full day of learning and contributing whatever she could to the projects assigned to her. The gentle motion of the bus, combined with the warmth of the setting sun through the window, created a cocoon of comfort that made her eyelids grow heavy. She tried to fight the drowsiness, knowing she still had several chapters to read for her evening marketing class. But the stress of the week was finally catching up with her. Charles noticed the young woman in the seat beside him, struggling to stay awake. Her head would nod forward. Then she would jerk back to consciousness, clearly embarrassed by her own fatigue. He recognized the signs of someone pushing herself beyond her limits, too. Something he remembered from his own early days of building his business. As the bus turned a corner, Caroline's exhaustion finally overcame her determination to stay alert. Her head tilted gently to the side, coming to rest against Charles's shoulder. She was deeply asleep within moments, her breathing slow and peaceful. Charles felt the gentle weight of her head against his shoulder and made a conscious decision to remain perfectly still. He could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands still clutched her notebook even in sleep, and the peaceful expression that replaced the worry lines that had marked her face while she was awake. There was something deeply human about this moment of unexpected trust. This young woman, clearly exhausted from her efforts to build a better future, had unknowingly chosen him as a safe harbor for a few moments of rest. Charles found himself feeling protective of her slumber, carefully adjusting his position to ensure she remained comfortable. The other passengers occasionally glanced their way, most with knowing smiles that suggested they too understood the bone. Deep tiredness that comes from working multiple jobs or juggling competing responsibilities. An elderly woman across the aisle gave Charles an approving nod, recognizing his kindness in allowing the young woman to rest undisturbed. As the bus continued its route, Charles found himself thinking about his own journey to success. He remembered the years of 18-hour days sleeping on the office couch and the constant worry about making payroll for his small staff. The difference was that he had been building his own company, while this young woman appeared to be working for others, learning and growing while supporting herself through what were clearly challenging circumstances. Caroline slept peacefully for nearly 20 minutes, her breathing steady and her face relaxed in a way that spoke of complete exhaustion finally being allowed its due. Charles remained motionless, occasionally shifting his weight slightly to prevent his arm from falling asleep, but always careful not to disturb her rest. When the bus hit a particularly large pothole, Caroline stirred awake, immediately realizing where she was. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she straightened up, turning to face the stranger whose shoulder had become her inadvertent pillow. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine mortification. "I can't believe I fell asleep on you. You must think I'm terrible." Charles smiled warmly, his eyes kind and understanding. "Please don't apologize. You were clearly exhausted, and honestly, you barely weighed more than a feather. I hope you feel a little more rested." Caroline studied his face, noting the gentle laugh lines around his eyes and the absence of any annoyance or discomfort. "You're very kind, but I'm still embarrassed. My grandmother would be horrified by my lack of manners." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," Charles replied, "but I think she would also understand that sometimes we all need a moment of rest, and sometimes strangers can provide that safely." They began to talk quietly, their conversation flowing naturally, despite having just met under such unusual circumstances. Caroline learned that Charles worked in finance, though he was modest about the specifics. Charles discovered that Caroline was pursuing her dream of working in marketing while supporting herself through internships and part-time work. "It must be challenging balancing so many responsibilities," Charles observed, genuinely interested in her experiences. "It is," Caroline admitted, "but my parents always taught me that anything worth having is worth working for. They didn't have much money to help with college, but they gave me something more valuable: the belief that I could achieve whatever I was willing to work toward." Charles was struck by her perspective. Despite her obvious financial struggles, there was no bitterness in her voice, no sense of entitlement or complaint about her circumstances. Instead, she spoke with gratitude for her parents' values and determination to prove worthy of their faith in her. As their conversation continued, Charles found himself increasingly impressed by Caroline's intelligence, her work ethic, and her mature understanding of what it meant to build a meaningful career. She asked thoughtful questions about the business world, clearly eager to learn from anyone willing to share their knowledge and experience. When Caroline's stop approached, she gathered her belongings with obvious reluctance to end their conversation. Thank you again for being so understanding about my impromptu nap," she said with a self-deprecating smile. "And thank you for the conversation. It's been the best part of my day." Charles made a spontaneous decision. "I know this might seem forward, but would you be interested in having coffee sometime? I'd love to continue our conversation, and I might be able to offer some insights about the business world that could be helpful." Caroline hesitated, not from lack of interest, but from uncertainty about whether she could afford the time or expense of socializing. "I'd like that very much," she said finally. "But I should be honest. My schedule is pretty packed, and my budget for coffee shops is practically non-existent." "I completely understand," Charles replied, handing her his business card. "There's a cafe near my office that makes excellent coffee, and I'd consider it an investment in supporting someone with your determination and potential." It wasn't until Caroline looked at the business card later that evening that she realized Charles Davidson was the CEO of Davidson Investment Group, a company she had read about in her business journals. The realization was both surprising and intimidating, but it also explained his generous offer and his obvious understanding of what it took to build a successful career. Their coffee meeting led to more conversations, and Charles found himself mentoring Caroline not because of romantic interest, but because he recognized in her the same drive and integrity that had fueled his own success. Caroline, meanwhile, discovered that Charles's wealth hadn't changed his fundamental kindness or his respect for hard work. Over time, their professional relationship deepened into friendship and eventually into something more meaningful. Charles was drawn to Caroline's authenticity and her refusal to let his financial success change how she treated him. Caroline appreciated Charles's genuine interest in her dreams and his willingness to support her goals without trying to control or direct them. Their love story began with that moment of unexpected trust on a city bus. A tired young woman finding safe harbor with a kind stranger, and a successful man remembering the value of simple human connection. It became a testament to the truth that sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin not with grand gestures, but with small acts of kindness between strangers who choose to see the best in each other. Years later, when people would ask how they met, both Charles and Caroline would smile at the memory of that evening commute when exhaustion led to trust, and trust opened the door to a love built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the depth of our connections with others.